Hey, welcome, dedicated healthcare leaders. Today, we're going to delve into the critical aspects of banking that directly impact the financial health of your medical practice. An area that maybe a lot of you don't take the time. I've noticed that a lot of business owners don't take the time to understand the kind of things that they can do with their banking. So, how confident are you in the setup and management of your practice's banking relationships? Share a banking icon if you're well organized, or a question mark if you're unsure and seeking guidance in the comments. Those are emoticons. Um, and tell us where you're from, where you're coming from. All right, getting into deep dive here into banking for medical practices. You got to choose the right bank accounts. There's a lot to choose from out there, and there's a lot of information. Maybe a lot of information that can misdirect you, or a lot of information that just kind of overwhelms you and you don't really understand. It's important to understand how to select accounts that align with the financial needs of your practice. Obviously you want to look for high interest earning accounts with low transaction fees, but there's more to it than that. You want to first understand the banking features that your bank offers. This is, choosing a bank first. When you need to know that they have the accounts that you need, they have the services that you need. A lot of times small businesses, just new small businesses go and open a checking account, and there's not a whole lot that they're getting there. Once you get up into multiple millions of dollars, you start getting into an area where banks can afford to offer you more services. And those services can be very, very useful. They don't necessarily put all these features on their websites. Those are for just basic retail banking features for small businesses. But there's a lot more that they can do that they don't publish on the web. And each bank is a little bit different. But you have to qualify. You have to qualify for these banking features by carrying certain level of balances or having a certain volume of business that you do. You may be a certain size of business that is large enough that it makes sense for you to take advantage of some of their features. So you need to be aware of that. You need to have what's called a relationship banker. Each bank will have a relationship manager for banks that qualify for these higher level services. And so you need to try to get to the point where you can get a relationship manager, and they'll give you a higher level of account, and there'll be options for different services. So, there's basic things that you can get, like online banking. You can do mobile deposits. You can get custom alerts on your account. And these kind of things will keep you on top of your finances. But let's talk about some other banking features that you may need to consider and ask your relationship manager about. One is doing online bill pay. There's a lot of ways to do this. There's software apps that you can put into QuickBooks Online. Like one real popular one is bill pay. And you can also get bill pay through some banks. They'll also integrate bill pay into their online services. When you get to be an advanced level banking, you get advanced level banking services. Sometimes you can even access that software directly through the bank's website, and it's integrated into their system. So those are kind of some things that you can look at. There are other online payment systems that are not at banks that you can use as well, that may have other features that maybe your bank doesn't have. So you have to do some shopping around with that. Credit card management. When you have employees and you issue credit cards to them so that they can spend, which one of the most extraordinary situations that I have seen in my time in helping um, medical related organizations is a dentist that had issued close to 100 credit cards on their business credit card account. And for the different employees, they had about 500 employees. They had about somewhere between 20 and 25 locations, and each locations there would be a few employees that would have a credit card, and they could and they were given the permission to buy certain types of things, like rewards for the employees, like buying them lunch one day, or buying gifts and rewards, or buying supplies for the office, and or buying medical supplies for the office. So they would use them for these things. But here's what one of the problems was when I got there. They were not even reconciling their checking, or they weren't reconciling their checking either, but they weren't reconciling their credit card account. And they had all of these cards issued out there. It looked like a pretty big. Imagine 100 credit cards. It's a lot of reconciliation to do, a lot of transactions. Not as many transactions as you might think, but there was a lot to do there. And without setting things up correctly, they were not able to maintain control. Well, the owner of this dental practice or dental company with all of these locations really didn't think it was worth the time and trouble to do that, because if they were spending on things they shouldn't be, it didn't add up to enough to really make it worth it to really tighten down security. That's the wrong approach, because one, you teach your employees that they can steal from you and get away with it, and when they learn that, they're going to start getting bolder. So you got to have security. Always have controls on your systems. I can't emphasize this enough. So when it comes to using credit cards in your practice, make sure you've got good controls. Credit cards can easily get out of hand. They're much easier to use than checks. With checking account, much easier to get out of hand if you don't really stay on top of them. You've got to reconcile those accounts every month. You reconcile them just like you reconcile your checking account. You got to set them up. There's a way to set it up as a credit card type account in QuickBooks, and that's what you want to set it up as, and it works like a checking account. But you can, as an advanced user, advanced level services at a bank, can get software from them that will allow you to control spending limits on each card that's issued to each employee. You can specifically, with each card, assign activity limits, and assign limits to what vendors they can buy from, even if you want to do that. There's all kinds of different levels that you can do this at. You can absolutely control the spending. One of the things that were happening at this one organization I was telling you about was that the employees were buying gas for their car with their company credit card, and nobody was seeing that until I put controls in place. I implemented this software and began putting controls on the credit cards. And I have to tell you, when you do this, you have to do this with, you have to implement it carefully, because once you start doing this, if an organization has already had unlimited controls, no controls on their credit cards, and they have employees that are using company credit cards, you're going to quickly find things. And when you do, it's going to stir things up. And so one of the issues that we had is the owner decided he didn't want those controls anymore. They were causing too many problems in the business. They were causing the employees to run into inability to use the card because they were using them in places they really shouldn't be. And they would have to get special permission. And it all turned into everything was an exception. And so when you implement these things, you need to be careful, make sure everybody's on board, everybody understands what the limits are, and that they're going to be some hiccups, because sometimes you need to make adjustments so that you can make sure that they can buy everything they need to buy without giving them a permission to buy things they shouldn't be buying. Anyway, credit cards can get to be a real issue when it comes to controls. So understand what your bank has to offer you in this area. External account transfers. You want to be able to make sure that you can easily transfer money between checking accounts within your, say, your medical group, or internally, but also externally to other organizations that you may want to pay with transfers. Also, you want to be careful with that. You need to have good control over who has access to your online accounts with the bank and can do transfers. So you need to make sure there are good controls there. Another is we're not using checks as much as we used to, but we still do. And it's really, there are lots of ways to be able to control spending by using checks. Because when you do pay your bills, say you schedule to pay your bills once a month, pay those bills every week or once a month or every other week, you can have check runs. And in those check runs, you can have them print the checks, attach the documentation, and put the stack of checks on your desk to sign. And you get to check every one of those and make sure that everyone has the documentation, that it's legitimate, and you sign it. And then you can have controls on your signatures with the bank. Maybe you have to have 2 people sign off on checks above a certain amount, or things like that you can do that make using checks much better for controlling the money. It takes a little more time, but you have a little more control and you're more in touch with what's going on. But also, there's another feature called what they call positive pay with banks. And positive pay allows you to inform the bank whenever you write checks, you give them the check numbers. And when those check numbers come in to clear, they notify you the check looks like it's being presented to clear today. And you get to have one more chance to deny that check. This keeps you from having employees steal checks and write them against the company's checking account. I even, when I was putting controls into this dental company, I found the owner was actually taking checks out of the check stock randomly, and using them to buy personal things. He felt he was justified by doing this because he owns the company. He should be able to do whatever he wants. And it's his company. He can do whatever he wants. But he was actually violating the security controls that kept people from stealing from him, doing it himself. He actually took a check without telling anybody about it, went out and bought a Mercedes-Benz for about $50,000 as a gift for his wife, and nobody knew about it. So with a positive pay in place, that check went to clear. Nobody knew about it. We thought it was a check that was fraudulently presented, so we rejected it. So it bounced and went back to the dealer. And you can imagine the fallout from that. So again, when you put security features like this in place, you have to make sure everybody's on board and everybody understands what it means and what the procedures need to be in place to make sure that we don't trip over these security features. But the bank can offer lots of things like security like this to keep people from stealing from you. You can also integrate with QuickBooks. QuickBooks does this with just about any bank, and any major bank is going to have the features for this. And when you're using QuickBooks Online, you don't even have to worry about updating. You automatically integrate your checkbook account with the your checking and your savings, or whatever accounts you have at the bank, with QuickBooks into what they call bank feeds. But in QuickBooks Online, it's they don't really call it a bank feed anymore. It's just you set up you connect to your bank, and it'll update automatically every night, and all you have to do is go in there and approve the transactions, or categorize them if you need to. But there's also ways to set up memorized rules that will allow those to automatically categorize and things like that. And so, but you need to use that carefully, because you need to also be documenting every transaction properly and recording it properly, and relying solely on those bank feeds can get you into trouble if you abuse them. Remote deposits. That's another feature. Allows you to take, say you don't want to have to run to the bank every day with checks that your patients may write to you for the services that they come in for. So at the end of the day, with you can use a mobile app where you can scan the checks and submit them that way, or their desktop scanners that you can slide them through and it'll read the checks, and you can do the deposits that way. That's fairly common, easy to get from any bank, really, for any business account. But you want to take advantage of those if you can. Wiring services, you want to be able to make sure that you can wire money when you need to send large amounts, or ACH services, especially for larger transactions and for payroll services. When you're using direct deposit now for employees in payroll services now. So you want to make sure that all of that, your bank may actually offer you the payroll services, but you can also do this through any payroll company like ADP or Paychex or any of those major payroll services. Zero balance accounts. You may not be aware of these. Zero balance accounts. One way that you use a zero balance account is, say you have a special account specifically for payroll. That's not an unusual use of this. And that account always has a zero balance. It's why they call it a zero balance account. But the way that you use this is you keep the money in your main checking account, and anytime there's presentation of a check against this payroll account, it sweeps overnight. So you may clear the check and you get a negative balance during the day on this zero balance account, and overnight a transfer will automatically be swept into that checking account to bring it back to zero. It's called a zero balance account. One of the things that this does is it protects anybody presenting anything from this payroll account that's specifically for payroll with any kind of other type of you don't publish that account, and so nobody knows that account number, and so they can't use it. And so you may only have one checking account where you can write checks against, or you may have a zero balance account that you use for paying bills, and you present checks against that account, but not the main account. So people may know that, what your main account number is, but nobody can present checks against it, because you could set it up so that it won't take presentations for checks or automatic ACH charges or whatever that come out of that you have another check account that you don't publish, that you do that for. Anyway, zero balance accounts kind of help you separate out different types of transactions for different accounts. If you're a larger company, that might make sense. Smaller companies, it doesn't make sense. But if you have a need for that, zero balance accounts, make sure you have the ability to do that. Another feature is merchant services. When your patients come in, they may want to use a credit card or a debit card to pay instead of with a check. And so you have to have merchant services for this. This means that you can swipe their card and the bank will charge their card for the amount, and then they charge you a discount, which is a service fee for every transaction, and they will transfer the net amount after they take their fee into your checking account as a deposit. And you'll have to keep track of those, because you'll have to make sure that you make those deposits in your books every day that you accept these credit cards and debit cards. So there's going to be an amount there, and you have to know how to make those deposits. But merchant services, just about everybody needs to have a merchant service account now, and they will charge you a percentage of every transaction plus a monthly fee, whatever, for that. And generally the rule is that you're not able to pass that charge directly on to the customer. You have to take that charge yourself. So you kind of have to work it into your system so that you're getting the amount of money that you need. Now with medical services, you're going to get what you get. And so the discount really is not a big deal for you, but you'd like to try to get the best deal you can. So that's a quick overview of all the different kinds of services that you need to be looking for as you grow a practice and maybe into a medical group and grow large enough. Some of the pitfalls that you need to watch out for. You're going to have potential for mismanaged cash flow, like we were talking about with not having the controls in place. There can be hidden fees. Banks are so good at this. They're so good at charging you fees for things you never expected, but it's hidden in the contract that you signed when you opened your account. It's kind of they call it adhesion contracts. Watch out for adhesion contracts. And if you want to look the definition of that up, you can. But basically, it means it's a one-sided contract, take it or leave it. And that's what you get with financial institutions. And I'm going to talk briefly about that with credit cards in a second here. But let me just mention that there are account structures that you need to consider so that you don't get charged too many fees. And you need to work that out with your relationship banker and come up with a strategy that gives you the services that you need without getting services that you don't need and paying for, so that you can make the fees that you're paying the bank most efficient for your needs. So you need to learn how to avoid these pitfalls. Now, let me just talk quickly about credit cards. This is a big topic for me because I've had experience with credit cards in business that I think most people are not even aware of the risks involved. One, avoid using personal credit cards for any reason. I don't care if you're actually doing an expense report and getting reimbursed and all of that, but you're presenting the personal credit card to a vendor, and then getting reimbursed, or using that business credit card for personal personal using. Those are two different issues, but it's inter the in, inter it's mingling your transactions between business and personal, which there are a lot of problems with that, not only from a tax standpoint, but from a business control standpoint. The IRS frowns on it. It can really mess things up for you. Don't intermingle your personal credit cards with your business credit cards. Have a business credit card that you use for business. One of the reasons is there's a little feature most people don't pay attention to, which is called the signature on file. Anytime you use a credit card or a debit card with a vendor, they can keep that card on file. Even if you haven't asked them to keep it on file, they can keep it on file. And if you don't pay a bill, let's say they normally invoice you, and maybe one time you paid with a personal credit card, for some reason, paid one of the bills. Now they have that on file. Now, say your business gets to where the point where you have to delay payments to some vendors for cash reasons. That vendor can go into their file, pull out that credit card you used one time a couple of years ago, and charge it. And they can get away with it. You will not be able, you can dispute that transaction, but the credit card will deny it. The credit card company will deny that dispute because of signature on file. And this can get you in trouble as an owner or even as an employee if you use personal credit cards for business purposes. I ended up with owing a lot of money out of my personal pocket for my corporation because I did this. Don't do it. There's also a clause in these adhesion agreements with the credit cards called universal default. They don't necessarily call it that in the agreement, but this is a term that's used to refer to these clauses that cause automatic defaults. So let's say you're carrying balances on your credit cards because it's part of your cash management, and you're paying interest on these amounts that you're carrying. If you have an increase in balance, or you have a change in your credit score, your FICO fluctuates, it always fluctuates. But in this clause, if it fluctuates, which it will, obviously I'm saying it will. That's why it's kind of a default clause that you're automatically in default on your credit card agreement at all times. And if they want to enforce a default at any point in time, they can. So if they have an agreement to give you some great interest rate on your charges, without notifying you, they can jump that interest rate up to whatever they want. There's no limits. Unless you're in a certain state, there's no limits. And with state, the credit card companies are now basing their operations in states that allow them to charge whatever they want. And since they're based in that state, they can do that no matter what state you're in. So you can go from like 0% interest to 25% interest overnight without being notified. So be aware of that. It's called a universal default. You want to control your employees' spending and avoiding unauthorized spending with the features like I talked about before. It's really not a good idea in my mind to use credit cards so extensively. There should be very limited in the use. You should maintain control, but we're getting technology that allows us to have more and more control. And so just if you do it, make sure you maintain control. Make sure you've got that banking feature that allows you to have that control. You also have automatic charges. So, sometimes you sign up for subscriptions and they just charge your account on the same day every month without without any interaction at all. It just automatically is charged. You can quickly lose control of that stuff. And in fact, you can have these little charges hitting you all the time, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. And you can be throwing away a lot of money and not even realizing it. It's another reason why you need to reconcile your credit card accounts just like you do your checking every month before you close your books every month. And be aware of what's being charged and pay attention to what's being charged on your credit card accounts and maintain control. There's an increasing lack of documentation with a transaction. So any account. I mean, when I was telling you about this great feature with bank feeds with QuickBooks Online, you can download these transactions, and all you have to do is categorize them, and you can be done with it, right? Until you get to an audit, and you don't have any documentation to back that transaction up. You don't have any information about that transaction. And this is the same with the credit cards. So you want to make sure that you have bookkeeping procedures that keep the proper documentation in place and that your transactions are properly recorded. But the advantage of these feeds is that it helps you to check transactions that you may not be aware of, that you can be aware of them quickly before you do reconciliation on your checking account. You can find out about them the same day they happen or the next day. Now, with banking, there's a lot of things going on in our country these days with banking and with our central banking system. And there's concerns with bank failures, and FDI insurance covers you up to $250,000. So as a business, how do you handle this? You may have a lot more than $250,000 in your checking. Just recognize that you're not insured for that amount over $250,000. So you want to make sure that you spread out your money with multiple banks. If you have a more than one checking account with one bank, that you're only going to be covered for $250,000. You're covered $250,000 per depositor, not per account. So each bank, you're covered for $250,000. I know this sounds like it's getting kind of complicated, and it's going to get really messy if you're trying to stay within that with your business. So you just need to be aware of those risks and manage that appropriately. Pay attention to what's going on in the banking industry, and make sure that your money is safe. Okay, just do that. Be aware of what's going on in the banking industry, and make sure you streamline your financial operations, do an automatic transactions and stuff like that, but make sure that there are controls in place. Make sure that you're managing your balances. Have accounts at multiple banks to spread the risk in case a bank fails. Maybe even have other ways of holding money that don't need instant access to, that you can get access to in a period of time that makes sense. So you may have your money in different types of accounts. So you want to have develop strategies for enhancing your liquidity management, maximizing your efficiency for your payment terms. Ensure that your banking setup is going to support the health of your business. And, you want to, when you have a relationship with a bank, it also helps you in getting loans. Because when you have checking account with a bank, they'll also want to lend you money. And so with having relationships with multiple banks is going to give you the ability to shop around for the kind of loans that you need. So with that, we talked about a lot with banking. I mean, who knew that there were so many things to talk about with banking? But it's an important piece of your business practice. And if you want to take control of your financial operations with smarter banking strategies that are tailored for your medical practice, contact us for a personalized free consultation, and we can talk about some of the banking possibilities that you might have, and how you can integrate seamlessly with QuickBooks Online. And we can talk about doing a QBO health check, and see if maybe we can also improve the health of your books. So with all that said, let's just close with a quick prayer. Lord, grant these professionals the clarity and insight to manage their financial resources effectively. Give them the wisdom to make the right choices in banks and in banking services, so that they may find strength in their stewardship and wisdom, that you would guide them in that, and that it would helps them to fulfill the purpose that you've given them in their chosen field. With this, we pray in Christ's name. Amen.